All right, I hope you're strapped in because I am strapped up. That's right. In my hands here, I have two of the absolute heavyweights in the Canon RF lines. The Canon 28-70 f2 and the Canon 50mm RF 1.2. These are two absolutely incredibly beautiful lenses that are also very, very expensive. What I want to do today was take a chance and put them head to head. Now you might ask yourself, why am I even bothering to compare a zoom lens to a prime? Doesn't that seem kind of redundant? Well, it could, but not for me, and there's a reason for my madness. For me, when I'm doing a lot of photography, I actually find that the 70-200 2.8 and the 16-35 2.8 tend to be where about 80% of my images come from. So because of that, when I am in the mid-range, I really want a lens that has a lot of beautiful character in it. I don't live there very much, but when I do want to get in that mid-range, which 50 is pretty much the definition of a mid-range lens, I want something that can really, really stand out from the crowd and justify going to that focal length. Now, in addition to having both of these lenses, I actually have two Canon R5s. So I've gone and taken each of the R5s and literally just copied the settings from one camera over to the other because I want to do as close to an apples to apples comparison as I can. Now, the first thing that really shocked me, you can see here right away, is this is the 50mm here on the left. This is the 28-70 on the right. I just was really shocked at the fact that 50mm on the 28-70 was a different field of view than it was on the 50mm prime. I mean, this is a $3,000 lens. I'm 100% shocked that it's going to be that far off in the readings. And the 50mm on the 28-70 is very clearly marked. It's right there in the middle, that 28-70 range. And I really thought that 50 on there would match really close to 50 in a prime. And you can look here and see that it is noticeably wider than the 50mm prime, something I really didn't expect to see. Now, let's go ahead. We got Baby Yoda here. Now, one thing about these lenses is I did want to test them all at f2 because that's where I tend to shoot and push it. And you know, the whole point of this test, these lenses are beautiful. They're expensive. They're going to look great at f8. Let's go and see what they look like here at f2. So when I come in, what you can see is both of the lenses, you know, man, they're both just tack sharp. They look really, really beautiful when you compare them literally side by side. But one thing that I found really interesting was actually the roll off here in the bokeh. And if you look here, the 50mm, while the eye is just completely tack sharp, you can see the difference in the background. And this is really pronounced in a lot of things. I'm going to come over here and look here at the chair, and you can just see the chair has a little softer bokeh in it than it does over here on the 28-70. So even at f2, you can see the difference in the background. And when I zoom out, you can just see it. It just feels a little bit softer here in the 50mm. All right, so here's another photo that really, I think, shows the difference between the two lenses. And once again, what I find really interesting is you can see, first off, the field of view is different. But I do want to talk about the fact that both of these lenses are both shot at f2. And you can really see a noticeable difference here in the background bokeh between the two lenses. That 50mm, even at a f2, which is not wide open, that's a 1.2 of max aperture, it has a much kind of creamier bokeh here than it does in the 28-70. Now, if I zoom in here, what you can see is, of course, the lenses are just really, really sharp. The leaf looks fantastic. You know, that's where the focus point was. I honestly think in this particular shot, for whatever reason, the leaf is just a hair sharper from the 50. But what I found interesting is if you start to come back here and look at the leaves directly behind it, and you can start to see just the bokeh is just softer here on that 50. You can really see it here in the twig as well. Both this little branch is sharp, but when you come over, it starts to soften up much, much faster than it does over here on the 28-70. And then when you look here in the background, I mean, it's a really, you know, creamy, smooth background back here. And you can still see just a hair bit of detail in that 28-70. So there's no doubt that the background bokeh is much, much higher here between the two lenses. I was actually really surprised at how that f2 would play between the two lenses. And maybe it's just me, but subjectively, I really prefer the look of the 50mm prime versus this 28-2. I mean, if I was taking this picture and I had to do it for a commercial shoot, I feel like in this 51, I have actually isolated the subject from the background. Whereas in the one from the 28-70, I feel like the background is still fighting with my subject a little bit. Whereas 50 gives me what I want right in the camera, right out of the box. So you can kind of see the differences I got when I was running around with these two cameras on the two lenses at the same time, getting the same subject. But what I want to do is I want to remove the variability of having two different cameras. Even though the cameras were set and I copied the settings right over from the other, I just wanted to do something in a studio environment where I removed the variability of maybe where I was standing and where I removed the camera variability. So what I did is I literally put the camera on a tripod and just decided to do a couple of tests in the studio. So let's take a look at that because some of these results did surprise me too. All right, so here I have Baby Yoda back in the studio. And once again, you can see the difference in the focal length right there. But what really just I gotta call attention to is both of the pictures look crystal sharp. I mean, they're both really, really sharp, even at this f2 range, which is what you should get when you're paying this much money for a lens. But once again, notice the background. These things are both at f2, but look at the difference in this PlayStation controller back here. You can really just see how it gets so much more soft and creamy back here versus a 28-70. Same thing with the tripod. You can see the head here. Look at how much more spread you get in the background. And even if I come up here to this picture frame, you can clearly see the picture frame there, and you can get a much more almost soft blur there from the thing. So when you look out there, it just feels a little different. Okay, so here we have a chart, and this is a great way to see any kind of weaknesses that we have in the lens. And I did find one in the 50 if you take a look at this. Now you do have the 50 on the left and you do have the 28-70 over here on the right. So when I zoom in here, you can see that they're both really, really sharp at a f2. I mean, they both look pretty good here. But what I found interesting, when I start coming to the corners of the frame, the 50 and the 28-70 look nice and sharp here on this top left. But if I come to the top right, look at this. I got a little bit of softness there in the corner on my 50. And if you look at the 28-70, it's pretty much sharp all the way around. I go to all the corners here, and you will see that the sharpness is pretty comparable in this corner and over in this corner. But in that top right corner, I definitely can see some softness here in my 50mm lens. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I think I might need to go and calibrate my 50mm lens, but I find it interesting that in just that one corner, the 50 is a little bit softer. Now, a big part of this might simply be because the 50 is closer. I'm just using more of the frame. So what you see here in the 28-70 is not giving me a true representation closer to the corners. I don't know. It's just something that I noticed here in the test. I thought something you might want to look at. Now, the other thing that I thought was really important to look at, while I did kind of a head-to-head test of these all at f2, all at 50mm, that's really not the way I would use the lenses, right? I mean, I'm going to use each of the strengths of these lenses to kind of do what they need to do. And so what I want you to do is I want you to look at the differences of the lenses and where that personality really shines through. And really the first thing you want to look at is, because you have that 50-1.2 aperture, is using that 1.2 aperture. It's a giant aperture and it really gives you such a beautiful soft depth of field. So what I did is I took Baby Yoda here, and this is what he looks like at f2, but here's what you get when you open that up to an f1.2. And in my opinion, if you jump between them, I mean, I just love the difference and the separation you get at a f1.2 versus an f2 on that 50mm lens. That really is a powerful artistic way to show this picture and adds a ton of character to the lens. And now that being said, coming over here to the 28-70, while you don't get that beautiful bokeh, you do get the flexibility. This is at a 50, but you can see you can go all the way up to 28 and up here to 70. So if you look here, that 28 to 50 to 70 does give you a nice range of flexibility. Now, there is one more area that I do think is worth pointing out if you are considering a lens system like that, and that is going to be minimal focusing distance. Because let's be honest, if you're going to have a lens this nice, you're probably going to be doing a lot of product and detail photography. So here we have Baby Yoda pulled as close to the camera as I can get. And one thing I wanted to do is I did want to basically see what the minimum focusing range would be if I brought that 70 millimeter all the way up to 70 and then 50. I found when I put it all the way to 70, I could get things a little bit closer. So that's what I wanted to test, that compared to the 50 millimeter on the prime. Now, that being said, you can see that even at 70 millimeters, the minimum focusing range on the 28 to 70 is actually a little bit further away than it is on the 50. Now remember, I did this on a tripod. The only thing I changed, I literally just switched the lens on there, and then all I did was I would just move Baby Yoda back and forth to get that minimum focus. And you can clearly see here that as far as minimum focus goes, it looks like the Canon 50 millimeter does have a slight edge. Now, that being said, it's so close. You can look at this. It's so close. I don't think it's going to really make a huge difference, but, I call it almost a tie, but I was impressed with how the 50 millimeter was able to hold up. All right, so there you go. You have a visual comparison of these two mid-range beasts right at 50, which is right in the mid-range of what we expect in photography. Now, all that being said, I do think there are two other things you do need to consider if you're looking at a battle of these two lenses. The first one is going to be the size and build. Now, both of these are RF lenses. They are both top of the line, and their quality, the build quality, is superb. I mean, they just feel solid, and it's kind of like holding a little brick in your hand. That being said, the 28 to 70 is a big and heavy lens, but then again, so is the 50. I know a lot of people have talked about the size and weight of this 28 to 70, and I'll be honest, maybe I'm biased because I use a lot of cinema lenses, but it is heavy, it is big, but I don't think it's anything crazy. You could comfortably shoot a whole day with this, no problem. I think the biggest difference between these as far as build goes is going to be the front diameter. Now, if you look, the 50 millimeter has a very standard 77 millimeter filter, whereas this 28 to 70 has a very unusual, I think it's a 92 millimeter filter size on it. What that means is that if you want any filters on the front, like a UV filter, a glass protection, or an ND filter, it's going to be extremely expensive to get something for this lens. Whereas the 50, you can get tons of them in 77 millimeter. It's not that bad. So the price differential is going to be a lot more for this if you want to add peripherals to the lens. So it is something to consider if you're looking at the lens. This lens is already about $700 more than this, and once you add the filters, you're looking at several $100s more for the filters versus that 50 millimeter. The other area that you really need to take in consideration, which I think is an important one that can't be overstated, is going to be autofocus. Now, when you're doing autofocus on the lenses, it is obvious that this 28 to 70 smokes the 50 in autofocus. It's a hard thing for me to try and capture when I'm doing photography, but the AF on this 28 to 70 is snappy, it's fast, it's consistent, and it locks on like glue. The 50 millimeters AF, honestly, this RF AF has always left me underwhelmed. It's not very good in my opinion. So there's no doubt that this 28 to 70 is a much better autofocus system. Now, if you're someone like me that does a lot of commercial work, you can deal with the clunky AF because you just go a little slower. If you are a photojournalist or someone that needs quick, fast sports stuff or something like that, you're going to want to get an AF that is sticky and is going to work well. But there is no doubt that this 28 to 70 smashes the AF on the 50 millimeter prime. All right, so now that I've had this mid-range battle of the beast, I guess I can come to a conclusion about which one of these lenses I think works best for me. Now, as I said, when I'm looking at a mid-range lens, the number one thing I want in that glass is personality. It needs to stand out. It needs to feel special. And in my opinion, this 50 millimeter with this clunky AF comes across as the clear winner in personality. I just feel the bokeh that I get from it, the depth of field, the separation I get in the subjects does stand out a little bit better than this 28 to 70. If I didn't have this 50, I'd probably be blown away by this 28 to 70 f2. Looking at these two lenses face to face, side to side, the fact that the 50 millimeter gives me that really good character and it comes in at $700 cheaper just makes it an all-around win in my opinion. Anyway, guys, I'd love to hear what you have to say with this. Please leave me your notes and comments down below. And yeah, I'd rather keep on shooting. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon.